So this video we're going to look at subtracting whole numbers. And so subtracting is pretty similar to adding, and the only major difference that you're going to see is that instead of carrying like we did in addition, where we added down a column and then we had to carry to the next place, we're actually going to borrow from the larger place values. And so this is something you've probably seen in the past, but just to remind you, okay, we're going to look at some problems. So to start off, there's really no difference, again, with addition and subtraction when we're looking at form. There's a horizontal way of writing subtraction, and there's also a vertical way, and we're going to be focusing on the vertical way, right? So when we look at horizontal problems like the one on the left, our first job is going to be to rewrite them in vertical form. That will make our life a lot easier because that lines up our place values very nicely, okay? So anytime you're doing subtraction, vertical form, okay? So let's take a look at some problems. So finding the difference, right? So this is a new vocabulary word, difference. The difference is the answer to a subtraction problem. So when you see the word difference, that's an indication to you to subtract. Okay, so in our first problem, nicely written in vertical form for us, right? Place values are lined up. And so our job here is really just to go down the columns, okay? And here's where things get a little trickier. We need to look at each place value. So look, in this case we're looking at the ones place, and it's going to be really important that the number on the top is larger. So if you take a look at this, 5 minus 2, well, 5 minus 2 is 3. That's something I can do without having to deal with any kind of negative numbers, so that's good. So I'm going to say 5 minus 2 is 3, okay, and then I'm going to move to the next one, and I'm going to say 8 minus 1 is 7. Great, I'm finished. Okay, so when that doesn't happen, when I don't get the larger number on top, that's when we're going to have to start borrowing. So in this first example, worked out really nice for us. In both of the place value columns, the larger number was on top. 5 is bigger than 2, 8 is bigger than 1. Let's go over to B. Okay, so again, I'm going to look down the column and I'm going to say 9 minus 6. Well, 9 minus 6 is 3. Okay, and so here's where I run into my next problem. I'm going to go 3 minus 5. Well, that's negative 2. That's bad. I don't like that. The larger number is not on top. So when that happens, this is where borrowing happens. So instead of this being 3, we need this to be bigger than what is below it, right? 3 is too small. If I can turn this into something larger, then I'll be able to subtract from it. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to the next place to the left, in this case, the hundreds place, and I'm going to borrow one digit from there. So in this case, it's just 1. I'm going to take that 1 and it's going to turn into 0. So this is going to go away and become a 0, and I'm going to take that and attach it onto the beginning, right? Just one of them. I know that in this case it's 1, but you'll see in other ones, for example, if there's like a 7 here, we decrease the 7 down to 6 and then just move one of those values over. So in this case, now if I look at the number, it says 13 minus 5. 13 minus 5 is 8, right? And then because this turned into a 0, there's nothing else to bring down. I don't need to bring down the 0, so I'm going to say my answer is 83. Okay, so that one's a little bit different because it's a 1. So let's take a look at a different problem where when we decrease it, that place value stays. So we run into our issue of borrowing right away in this problem. 4 is smaller than 7, and so I can't really do 4 minus 7 without, again, kind of introducing negative numbers, which I don't want to do. So I'm going to look to the place right next door, right, and that's the 6. I'm going to decrease this down to a 5. So let me erase my, my little arrow so I have some space. So right above it, I'm going to turn this into a 5, right, because I'm borrowing one of the 6, which means there's only 5 left. Because I've borrowed 1, that means that this 4 is now going to become 14. So I just try to squeeze in a value there. So this now says 14 minus 7, which is 7. Okay. This now, because I borrowed, it doesn't say 6 minus 3, it only says 5 minus 3, that's 2. Okay, and then this 2 just comes down because it's kind of like 2 minus 0. Or you can just think about bringing it down because there's nothing to subtract it from. Okay, so let's do one more of these, and then we'll talk about the horizontal form. So 4 minus 1, that's good. I can do that. That's 3. Okay, 6 minus 9, that's not good. I can't do that without it being negative, so I'm going to look to the place to the left, and I'm going to turn this into a 2. Okay, and then this is going to become 16. Okay, so now this is 16 minus 9. I can do that. That's 7. Now I'm going to look at the next column and say 2 minus 8. Again, that's kind of a problem. I don't like that. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to borrow from here. I'm going to turn this into a 1. Okay, and then this is going to become 12. So now it says 12 minus 8. That's 4. Good. Now I'm going to look at this one. Again, there's a problem. Okay, 1 minus 2 doesn't really work, so I'm going to borrow from here, turn it into a 0, and this is going to become 11. 11 minus 2 is 9, and so there's my answer, 9,473. Okay, so in that case, we had a lot of borrowing. We had to actually borrow from almost all of our places, so that's going to happen sometimes. Okay, so that's a really good, solid problem. It's pretty big numbers, and we had to do a lot of borrowing. So if you can handle that one, you're probably good to go. Okay, so let's take a look at a couple of our vertical form problems. Okay, I'm sorry, that should say horizontal form. We're going to turn them into vertical form. So again, when it looks like this, I'm going to say 36 minus 19. I want to set it up so it looks like this: 36 and 19. The 6 and the 9 are in the ones column, at the ones digit place, and the 3 and the 10, or the 3 and the 1 are both in the tens place. So I line that up. Okay, and again, it looks like I have to do some borrowing here. I'm going to come here and turn this into a 2 so that I can put a 1 in front of the 16. So now 16 minus 9 is 7. 2 minus 1 is 2, and that would be my answer, 27. Okay, and then one more. So again, we got to be careful. I'm going to write 1409, and I need to make sure that these digits line up properly. So I don't want to write it like this. I'm going to write it incorrectly, so don't write this down. I don't want to write it like this, because if you notice what happens, the 8 is a ones digit, and the 9 in the other number is a ones digit, and they should be lined up, and right now they're not. Right, so you want to make sure that when you write the problems, okay, from horizontal to vertical form, that you do it so that the place values line up like they should. Okay, so this is subtraction, so I'm going to put the subtraction symbol out here to the left. 9 minus 8, 1. Okay, 0 minus 6, that's bad, so I'm going to come here and I'm going to turn this into a 3, and that now makes my digit here a 10. 10 minus 6 is 4. 3 minus 3 is 0, and 1 doesn't have anything to combine with, so I'm going to bring it down. So it looks like 1409 minus 368 is 1041. Okay, so let's take a look at one more problem. This is your word problem, and so for all of your different operations, it's entirely possible that you might see a word problem that's asking you to perform that operation, but you need to go through and set it up, and you need to figure out that this is subtraction. So again, I know that in a subtraction lesson, it's pretty obvious that this example is going to be subtraction, but on a quiz or a test, when everything's all mixed up and all of the operations are there, you might need to figure that out yourself. So let's take a look at this problem, read it, and then figure out what indicates that this is subtraction. So it says your next test is going to have 11,327 questions on it. In the first hour, you complete 472 of those questions. How many questions do you have left on the test? And so when I'm looking at this, the keyword that I'm seeing, the key kind of phrase is, how many do you have left, right? This kind of phrase right here, which means that we kind of got rid of some, right? We decreased the total, and that's why I'm kind of thinking this is a subtraction problem. So look for those kind of keywords to help you figure out that you're going to be subtracting. Okay, so in this case, I'm going to say I started off with 11,327 questions, and again, I'm going to be careful with my place value. The 2 is in the last ones place, and the 7 is as well, so I'm going to write them and make sure that I write it in the correct order. And now I'm going to subtract. 7 minus 2. 7 minus 2 is 5. That's good, I didn't need to borrow. I do need to borrow here, so I'm going to turn this into a 2, so I can make the tens place a 12. 12 minus 7 is 5 as well. Again, I got a 2 and a 4 here. That's not good. 2 is too small, so I'm going to come here and turn this into a 0 so that I can make this a 12. 12 minus 4 is 8. And then I have a 0 that can come down because there's nothing in that spot. And I have a 1 that can come down because there's nothing below it in the second number. So it looks like after the first hour, you have 10,855 questions remaining.